This week on the SEO Weekly, when is Bard and LLM coming to search? Come on, Sundar. Talk to Wall Street Journal says it's absolutely coming, but do we know when? Nope, we do not. Bing, so powerful, so strong. Principal product manager Fabrice Canel shared his 2 cents on Duda's webinar. OpenAI, ChatGPT, are you safe? Are you safe? Why is Italy banning ChatGPT? France might be next. Germany might be next. UK? US? Yeah, right. Good luck with that. And Neeva, the co-founder and CEO of Neeva, Sridhar Ramaswamy, talks to us all about the future of search on Rankable. This is an interview that you are not going to want to miss. Plus, EEAT and content relevance, a little bring it back to OrbitWise. So much good stuff in this episode. Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of the SEO Weekly, where queries are weird, advice is controversial, and everything depends. I'm your host, Garrett Sussman of iPullRank, and every week I cover everything going on in the world of SEO. We're talking Google updates, AI, Bing, ChatGPT, which technically SEO, blog posts, new tools and features, webinars, podcast communities, Twitter, LinkedIn, you name it, I'm on it. If you're into this stuff, please subscribe to the channel, give us a like, leave us a comment, share on the socials. Genuinely appreciate it. Okay, let's dive in. So while there weren't any massive algorithm updates last week, the big story at Google continues to be how they're going to integrate Bard, AI, LLMs into search. Is it even going to be integrated into search? Remember when Bard was rolled out, initially we thought that was going to be just like Bing, like part of the search interface tested with user group, but it was actually this completely separate application. Now, last Thursday, Kruppa of the Wall Street Journal interviewed CEO of Alphabet, Sundar Pichai, and asked him, is that the plan? And Sundar says, absolutely. Absolutely, it's the plan. The timeline, it's something they were working on. They were iterating on a product, but the timeline has been moved up due to the moment in the industry. And if you look at the stats, for instance, Wall Street Journal posted this similar web data on March visits to Google, 75.3 billion visits. ChatGPT, 1.6 billion. Bing, 957 million. Okay, so obviously Google is still massively dominating the market share. However, just an incremental amount, like we're talking percentage points of market share taken up by any of these competitors, could result in billions of dollars. I mean, Google has over $160 billion annually in ad revenue. So any type of wins matter. So what did Sundar say? Honestly, he still didn't give an exact timeline, but he did indicate that it is inevitable. And not only that, they're just kind of identifying ways to improve the product, iterate, test, and then in the background, save money. I mean, there's a lot of cost-cutting exercises going on in Alphabet as they try to continue to maximize profits as this business model possibly changes going forward with the advent of search technology. In fact, there's a lot of computing power that's required for AI, and naturally the resources need to be taken into consideration, in terms of profit, revenue, all that. So very much something to keep your eyes on. Fascinating stuff from Google. One other note that came out last week was that Google is actually reallocating some of their quality rater guidelines, folks who are just actually look at websites, the quality raters, they look at the quality rater guidelines, they look at the websites, and they assess, how accurate search results are based on Google's attempts at, the EEAT, experience, expertise, authoritativeness, trustworthiness. Remember, this isn't ranking factors. They're not affecting the rankings, but they're trying to say, okay, is the algorithm going in the right direction? Well, a lot of these folks who work at the contract company Appen are now working on Bard answers. However, it turns out it's slightly problematic because they're asking to evaluate these answers in 60 seconds. And if they're not a subject matter expert on the question and the answer, it's kind of hard for them to know. They have to do research. So even being able to assess and provide machine learning human support for Bard's answers is a tricky topic. Either way, continuing to work on the product, it's still not 100% there. There's still a lot of work, and it's not even on the most powerful models, but it's coming. According to Sundar Pichai, it's coming, so something to pay attention to. So speaking of LLMs and AI chatbots, as we teased in last week's episode of the SEO Weekly, last week, our founder, Michael King of iPullRank, interviewed on our Rankable podcast the co-founder and CEO of AI-powered search engine Neeva. Neeva is badass. And so Sridhar Ramaswamy came on and had this fantastic, awesome, fascinating interview with Mike. They were all over the place. They talked about, actual specific technical information retrieval techniques used by Neeva compared to Google. They talked about, the future of life petition to stop AI. They talked about the future of search, how to get on, how to use, SEO and how SEO should think about visibility for these chatbots. And what's really interesting to me is the way that Sridhar talks about how he perceives the future of search in terms of what are going to be the best answers, whether we're talking about social media like TikTok or people Reddit or just having a featured snippet or just clicking on the link and reading a 1,500 blog post. Well, you know what? I'm going to have Sridhar explain it himself. Let's hear what he had to say when it comes to how he believes search is going to evolve in the way that we use it.
No one wakes up and says, I want to click on a link. That's what it comes down to. Okay, if you have a question, no one puts in a question and says, I'm going to be excited to click on the first link that shows up. Said no one. And so from that simple perspective, it's just going to be more and more the expectation that, if there's an answer to that, like the experience that just gives it to you is always going to win. It's like, it's Occam's razor. It's that thing built into all of us where we are like, yeah, I want to do the smallest amount of work for any particular task that I have in hand. And so rather than get like philosophical about this and that, I basically go like, if I want something and you can just give it to me, please just like give it to me. Okay. And so that's where I think search is going to be influenced in a pretty big way. It's not the be all end all. I think there's a lot more, context carrying, like as you go from having things be more of a conversation. And obviously, no one wants like a pile of text. The other thing that is true is like, no one woke up and said like they want to read a 1,500-page blog. They're like, if you can give them the answer in 3 sentences, always preferable. So absolutely, you're right. I think like all of these interactions will evolve. But from the simplicity of like, are answers better than links? Yep, answers are better than links. By the way, Google knew this from 10 years ago. As many of your listeners know, it is at once nice and at once depressing to be part of featured snippets. And the reason Google did it is because 3 lines of featured snippets always trumped over a link that people had to get in and extract information from. So I think that is there's no turning back point. There's a lot that has to happen in terms of how things will evolve. And I'm sure that you noticed that yesterday, Bing is like, hey, in Sydney chat, we now also have ads. And we all went, yay, no.
So it's fascinating. It's true. Nobody wants to click a link. Nobody wants to click a link. Check out the rest of that interview because there's so many other insights and gems, like the fact that apparently Gmail is still built, like the search of Gmail is still built on 2 different systems, a super old one and a super new one, which is why search in Gmail still really, really sucks. Great interview. And I'm actually excited. So next week, or this week coming up, we are interviewing Jess Joyce on Rankable. She is going to talk all about GA4, the upcoming sunsetting of universal analytics, and how GA4 is something that SEOs need to stay calm, not freak out. It's going to be okay, but it's coming in July and you kind of really need to know it. But back to AI. When it comes to Bing Chat, a little more than a week ago, Duda hosted a really awesome webinar. It had Barry Schwartz of Search Engine Roundtable, Lily Ray of AMSIV, Dwayne Forrester, and the principal product manager of Bing, Fabrice Canel. And Fabrice answered a ton of questions very transparently about how Bing was integrating the OpenAI LLM into its chat. And he had a bunch of insights and talked a little bit about, how Bing in general kind of thinks about search, how search quality improved significantly once it started adding these models in terms of relevance and quality and answers. I mean, still not perfect. Obviously, there's a lot of factuality errors, as we discussed in last week's episode of the SEO Weekly, but it's really interesting the way that he intimated that they can actually see the searches and the way that people are searching, whether they're using the Bing chat for navigational search or more exploratory search. It really speaks to this idea for SEO of how, as these tools are integrated into search, will it change the way that we think about keyword research? Because if you can talk and chat with your search engine, then you're not going to be putting these head terms of like email marketing or search engine optimization. You're going to be like, well, how do I improve my search engine optimization? What type of content do I need? But, a much longer, complicated search. So the way that we think about creating content will be more kind of entity-based, more concept-based, as opposed to just thinking of how can I rank for this specific keyword. Watch the entire webinar. They, Lily and Dwayne talk a lot about using AI generation tools, whether they recommend it or in a lot of cases don't recommend it without a lot of human intervention for creating, search engine optimized type of content across the board. Great webinar. Even though it's more than a week, I thought it was worth bringing up. One of the really interesting things that happened last week in the world of AI chatbots is regulation and government intervention. Italy banned ChatGPT. There was a privacy breach, where, accounts were released, and Italy was like, nah, that messes with our guidelines. Nope, not going to happen. Interesting CNBC report where they kind of break down country by country and the EU in general, how we're potentially going to see this impact and what countries are currently doing. For instance, UK is already talking about regulation. US kinda is on regulation, but really isn't doing much. Germany, France, Ireland are already talking about joining Italy in terms of banning altogether. China doesn't currently allow ChatGPT because of the explicit censorship for much of the internet, but there are a lot of examples of companies already creating competitors in the Chinese landscape. So whole other category. But what's going to be really interesting going forward is how do these LLMs and these companies like OpenAI respond to this? And is it going to be enough for countries? And how will that impact how like SEOs have to think about our visibility on those platforms? But as a result of this, coincidentally, OpenAI did release their own safety kind of transparency guidelines of how they're thinking about safety when it comes to LLMs. Is it satisfying? No, not really. They talk about putting, kind of black box parameters to protecting kids and protecting individuals, saying like, oh, if you reach out to us, we will remove your data from the large language model, which seems sketchy, shady at best. In fact, they do admit that because for any publicly available private information, it is part of the training model. They're not stripping it up there, but they are putting these parameters saying like, you can't ask for the personal address of an individual. You can't ask for personal information via these prompts. Is it effective? I mean, it seems like the guardrails are on there, but we've already seen examples of people being able to jailbreak ChatGPT. So privacy and safety is going to be a major issue going forward with these large language models and the chatbots. How it will play out in different countries, up for debate. We'll see. Very curious. Whenever Rand Fishkin puts out something on the internet about marketing, you have to read it. His insights are so good. His point of view is so strong, and he really thinks through things from a emotional, empathetic perspective of making humanity a better place. Respect the hell out of it. And so he wrote an article all about how the floor of content, the minimum, has been raised with these generative AI tools like ChatGPT, how you can produce better content than you could, before, using templates or other tools to, set the bar, like whether you're like an SEO or a marketer. I completely agree with what he is saying right now, because he points out that tool LLMs like ChatGPT are, in essence, they coined the idea that they're like spicy autocomplete, right? They're large language models. They're just predicting the next word. And it's really, really compelling. It's really, it seems very real. It is smoke and mirrors, but it seems very real. And he identifies 3 things that people can do as content creators that LLMs at this time can't: emotion, novelty, creative insights. That you can add this sort of vulnerability in there, that you can come up with new ideas that the LLMs aren't going to, because they're basically regurgitating existing content. And they can do creative insight, like kind of extrapolate ideas and keep going down a path that an AI chatbot LLM can't do on its own. My counterpoint is, I think this is temporary. Like, I really think there's going to continue to be the art of prompt engineering, and creative folks will be able to extract creative ideas. Because I had a deep shower thought, and you think about the idea of creativity, and so many of our ideas are based on the cumulative events and experiences that come before it. Now, can a robot go into the world and experience real things? No, but if it can read everything in no time that we can, it has more knowledge in a lot of ways that people don't. So it's only a matter of time where, if you can spark that creativity with a creative prompt saying, give me an analogy that meshes this concept and this concept, that feels new, that is going to be an inevitability. So while I think Rand has some really good ideas, I think it's all of these limitations are temporary. No one can predict what the next 1, 5, 10 years of LLMs and AI is going to look like, but we are at the basic stages now. And I think in a year from now, it's going to look far different. So that's my 2 cents. What do you think? What do you think? Speaking of creative prompts, the one and only Aleda Soul has put out another great resource for free that you can use. Basically, it's a prompt generator for SEO, using the 5 W's and A's. So who, what, why, where, when, and how, as a spreadsheet that can basically create the prompt. So, you answer all these questions. She has a really nice template on how you can fill it out, ultimately producing the prompt that you can then use to get generated AI content that's going to be more sophisticated, more targeted, more well thought out, more specific than just these generalized prompts that spit out garbage. I think this is the direction that we'll see more and more prompt engineering go. But this is a really great template that you can use. As always, highly recommend, if you're looking for SEO templates, iPullRank is a Chrome extension for ChatGPT that's free. They have a premium version that you can check out. Christoph Kemper and the team continually to put out these amazing features. So definitely check out iPullRank for your prompt engineering and really like leveling up your AI generation game. So Google's not perfect. Sometimes they get things like wrong, and there's some tips and tricks from some OG experts that you can always try out. One that caught my attention in the world of SEO Twitter, Dan Shore, had an article that never really ranked for the targeted keyword. So deleted it, let it 410, did not redirect it, just kaput out of there, not trying to salvage anything, right? So what they did, though, is he took the exact same content, put it on a completely different URL, republished it, and then saw, ranked 1 to 2 for its keywords and picked up an extra 11,000 visits. Like, that's a big win for, something that feels like it should have worked and didn't. His hypothesis is sometimes Google does like kind of pigeonhole and misinterpret a page, and you can't escape it even with content updates or redirects. So that republishing worked for him. Really, really cool thing to try. Obviously, it's not going to work all the time, and hopefully, it's like this is like a bug, not a feature in the Google algorithm ranking situation. But cool insight from Dan. Okay, I realize entity SEO is kind of jargony, but it's the way that Google works. They've been telling us for a while. We've done webinars on it. We've written about it here at iPullRank, and there is just this freaking dynamite article that was written on Search Engine Land by Timothy Warren and co-written by Andrew Ansley of Helium, talking all about entity SEO, the definitive guide. I mean, they talk about what it is, really break down this idea that the internet is a bunch of things, nouns, person, place, and things that all have relationships. And there are ways that you can communicate that to Google so it understands, because Google really uses entity first. It's moving more to these ideas of concepts and nouns as how it ranks than just the old concept of keywords. That's how, these algorithms have gotten more complicated and smarter, like BERT, these natural language processing models, and MUM are using these concepts across multimodal, using like images, videos, written text to understand what a thing is. Wikipedia is a great example of using entity SEO, and Wikidata is kind of a fundamental way that a lot of Google understands what things are. So in the article, Timothy breaks down, what it is, why it's important, the history of semantic search, which is semantics, the meaning of things, linguistics tied to entity SEO and the relationship between the meaning of things, how to identify and use entities in the search, like the actual practical usage of how you say, okay, how does Google consider, what does it think of my business, my articles as an entity from an entity perspective, and then how to use these entities to actually rank in the web content. Fantastic article. It's a deep dive. Yes, it's a little confusing, but as an SEO, if you can understand this, you can really elevate your ability to rank and establish yourself as an authority for whatever entity and topic that you are. When people crank out content, they get really on a roll. And last week, I mentioned Daniel K. Chung and what he's been writing about schema. Well, directly related to this whole entity SEO conversation is what Daniel's been writing about when it comes to schema. And he put out a really excellent article all around semantic search, semantic SEO. What I think is the most helpful part of Daniel's article, which I highly recommend you check out, is how to actually implement schema, the structured data, the little markup code that explains to Google all the components in an understandable way of what your website is, what it understands, what you can use in that structured data, how you can kind of nest it all together and tie it together to really effectively help search engine understand what you're all about. Fantastic article there. So both those articles, kind of companion pieces, even though those guys, I don't think mention each other, but definitely check them out. You can really up your semantic game. I know it's jargon, but it's important stuff. It really is. Really interesting article last week from Viola Eva on Search Engine Land, all about LinkedIn's SEO strategy and how they quietly launched this AI collaborative article initiative. Basically, AI creates the articles that of similar concepts, similar content from any sort of contributor, and then it's edited by humans and published under this advice subfolder. And out of nowhere, they produce like 30,000 articles, and the SEO is zooming up through the ranks. LinkedIn also does really well, obviously, for its individual profile pages, but for its pulse, whenever people are publishing their like newsletters on LinkedIn, and those rank really well. For instance, if you were to search who's the best SEO expert, chances are you'll see a featured snippet from a LinkedIn Pulse article, which has its own set of issues of why that ranks number one. But when we talk about the idea of you're not always needing to think about SEO for your own site. There are opportunities for your keywords, whether it's a kind of complementary, not competitor. So if you make a product and there's a media publisher who's ranking for your keywords, or a social network, there are opportunities for you to rank and help your own SEO and visibility, which is ultimately the name of the game, when it comes to SEO, your share of voice, share of visibility on the searches, and how you can use LinkedIn to do that. So Viola breaks it down and how it makes sense to continually write on LinkedIn about the topics that you want to be relevant for, so you can potentially show up in these collaborative LinkedIn articles. I see you, LinkedIn AI. I see you. Very interesting hypothesis by Patrick Stocks on the Ahrefs blog, talking all about this idea of, does going viral help with SEO? So he had a couple of case studies. The idea is, in one of his major examples, back when Donald Trump had his press conference, or Rudy Giuliani had it at the Four Seasons landscaping company, it was a viral opportunity for that company to generate a ton of press because it wasn't the Four Seasons hotel. And naturally, they got a whole bunch of links for it, but did it ultimately result in better search rankings for relative terms? And the answer, honestly, is no. They generate a ton of merchandise and they capitalize on the phenomenon going viral at the moment, where people are trying to buy t-shirts about Four Seasons landscaping, but it wasn't long-term successful. Same thing with Gravity Payments, where the CEO, who always said he would take the $70,000 income salary that all his employees take, who ultimately left the company, same sort of thing. Would get viral links from him going out and making that statement, but ultimately doesn't help their rankings. Finally, with layoffs.fyi during COVID, when people are getting layoffed, and the website was covering where this was all coming from, over time, only brand mentions helped the SEO of that. So, big question Patrick's asking is, is it worth it? Is it worth it for an SEO perspective to focus on digital PR? And his conclusion is no. And I don't disagree with him. I think the bigger picture here is how important it is to have an integrated strategy with both your ads team, your digital PR team, with your social media team, so that when people do go and search for your website, branded search terms, your website plus something, that you show up at the top of those results, and not some news story or some other competitor taking advantage and hijacking your brand search terms queries for the opportunity. That said, personally, I'd be interested to look at a case study if it was focused more specifically on industry blogs. Like if you go viral specifically for your industry and do it multiple times again and again, then I could see it helping, because then you're generating a ton of high value relevant links, which is the key here, right? Like just a general media site probably doesn't help in terms of relevance, but for industry specific relevant links, I'd imagine it would have more value there. Just something to percolate in the brain. Really cool article from Patrick. So tying all of this EEAT and entity stuff together, on the OnCrawl blog, Olaf Kopp put together this really comprehensive article all around, in times of EEAT, why simple SEO is no longer enough. So he breaks down with a lot of visual graphics the relationship between SEO and all of the real world relationship, entity, relevance concepts of EEAT, and what Google does to evaluate and ultimately rank content. Now, it is far from perfect the way that Google ranks, but all these signals could contribute. And Olaf breaks down a lot of what it is and how Google uses things like relevance and vectoring of words. Actually, speaking of relevance, so relevance and the topical authority and the turning words into vectors and embeddings comes from this idea that each word can be turned into a mathematical value, and then you can see the relation between semantically related words. King and queen have a relationship, king and prince have a relationship, king and man have a relationship. And if each of those are mathematically have a value, you can show what that looks like on the graph. In fact, our own mentioned this last week on the SEO Weekly. John Murch and Michael King put together OrbitWise, which is a way for you to check your website page's relevance score based on that mathematical value compared to the other top 10 for a specific keyword. So if you want to check your own relevance, go to OrbitWise. If you want to understand how relevance and EEAT all work together, potentially, because remember, these are based on patents that Google has published that they don't necessarily 100% definitively use, but are available and possibly use, but potentially gives insights into how they work, shows how, Google uses these different signals to potentially show rankings. Curious what you think when it comes to EEAT and entity search. Got very jargony this episode, but a lot of it is worth thinking about as you build out. And there's value in simplifying all this, right? Ultimately, good content, creating more content about the topic that you're expert in, making sure it's helpful and insightful, not just regurgitating what everyone else is putting out there, making sure it's covered by experts who know what they're talking about with proof that they are experts. EAT. Check out that article. It's technical, but it's very fascinating. E-commerce SEO, it's massive. If you're selling anything, you got to show up in organic search. It's such a huge source of revenue and traffic. So Kevin Indig used to work at Shopify, learned and knew everything about this topic, teamed up with Lydia Infante over Insanity, and he put together a epic, comprehensive blog over the course of, last few months, guide all around e-commerce SEO, talking all about things like strategy, what it is, content marketing for e-commerce SEO, and then going on to like the on-page kind of step-by-step, the technical SEO step-by-step, link building for e-commerce, and ultimately SEO step-by-step. It covers everything. It's really insightful. He's seen a lot of it firsthand, so he really knows it inside out. So when we're talking EEAT and expertise, Kevin Indig is what's up. Great guide. Check it out. Highly recommend. Who doesn't love a good team up? When it comes to news SEO, Barry Adams is a legend in the field, knows the niche inside and out, everything for media publishers when it comes to, getting your publication to show up across the board. And then WTF is SEO is an incredible newsletter from Jesse Wilms and Shelby Blakely that they've been writing these comprehensive deep dives into a variety of topics. So good. Both have newsletters teamed up. So Jesse and Shelby wrote a special edition for Barry, all about the idea of integrating SEO into your newsroom. So they go through very detailed, a whole bunch of considerations in terms of, the specific news events, whether it's evergreen or it's a new topic, a new vertical, or like a tent pole event, how to handle that and talk to your newsroom about it. Generally, relationships, managing relationships across the newsroom and embedding a culture of SEO, and ultimately training everybody on SEO. So many insights, obviously technical SEO as well. They cover it bit by bit. What I love about their writing is it's very practical and actionable, like recommendations of what you should actually be doing in terms of being available on Slack or, making sure that you're considering journalism first. Really cool, thought-provoking ways to approach it. Great work, great team up between the three of them. As SEOs, we know how to search more than most people, but every now and then it's good to kind of refresh your search operators. So Eric Emanuele put together his top 40. So putting things like site, whatever you're looking for, so you can search within a specific site, or even looking within a title for a keyword, adding that in your search query to get a more specific idea result that you're looking for. It's something that most people don't use, but it can be incredibly helpful. There's a bunch that aren't as reliable anymore, but also just knowing things along the lines of like putting quotes around a query can help you get that actual query as opposed to, a different version. Despite the advancements of NLP, search operators are super helpful. So great post there. And finally, we did a little bit of a deep dive on our webinar replay, all about website migrations. Andrew McDermott wrote all about what you should be doing to prepare. And then it's kind of speckled in with all of the video clips from Zach Chahalis and I through our webinar replay that we had a couple weeks ago. So if you've got a website migration, if you've got a re-platforming, if you're even doing a redesign, definitely bookmark this article. We've got a checklist that you can download of what you should go through. But like even going through the wireframes, you got to get an SEO involved at the design process, because the way you set up your menu or your H1 tags across the board is going to impact organic traffic. And you really don't want to mess it up when you do that migration. Please get involved. And my big call out for all this too is if you are at a role as the SEO and your CMO, hasn't mentioned anything about a project, you don't know if you'd be involved, reach out to your head of marketing and let them know, hey, if we're considering at the C-suite to do this, involve me from the get-go, because you don't want to find out way late in the game once a ton of decisions have been made that ultimately could have a real negative impact and cost you significant revenue, millions, billions of dollars. Next Wednesday, big heads up. So I'm doing a Twitter Spaces with SEMrush and Nikki Hallowell, and we're going to talk all about the March Core 2023 update, kind of like understanding where it's at, what happened, what we think are ridiculous SEO hypotheses. I'm super excited about it. I hope you join me. It is Twitter Spaces, so it'll be audio only. So if you like the soothing rhythms of my voice, I don't know. I've actually been told that I have a voice for radio, which I think is a compliment. Anyway, join us there. You can find us on Twitter. That's it. Another episode of the SEO Weekly in the books. My name is Garrett Sussman of iPullRank. As always, if you're into this, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Send me some love. Give me a like. Share on the socials. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. If you know someone who needs some SEO or content strategy work, send them to iPullRank. Yeah, I asked. Make a referral. We know our ish. Anyway, that's it. I'll catch you next week. Thanks again for tuning in. Peace out.